many households are expected to downsize and take advantage of this tax break on super?
Who am I coming back to? Okay.
So I might refer that to Ms Wilkinson, but we may also require our tax analysis division, who undertook the costing of the measure, to, if we need to get some of the assumptions underpinning the costing.
So Jenny Wilkinson, Retirement Income Policy Division. We're in the process of developing this measure. We don't have an estimate of the actual number of individuals who would downsize. That wasn't necessary in order to actually conduct the costing, and I'm happy for Mr Ewing to walk you through the process of actually conducting the costing. Certainly the expectation is that the downsizing measure will provide an incentive for some people who were thinking about whether they wanted to downsize. It provides a small incentive for them to downsize, so it reduces, as the Treasurer has said, one of the barriers to downsizing. And it potentially can affect the timing, so it might be the case that somebody who was thinking about downsizing down the track would decide to bring that forward. So those are the sort of the two effects that you'd expect the downsizing measure to have.
But just staying with this issue, because it seems extraordinary, you've got no figures on it, does that mean the Treasury hasn't modelled the impact of this measure on house prices? Like, if you don't have numbers, how can you work out what's going to be the overall impact of it?
Let me make a general point in response to that question. When this is a package which overwhelmingly is designed to increase supply of housing. Now, obviously, the price of anything is a function of supply and demand. When the demand exceeds supply, prices will go up. And when we have a housing affordability issue or an affordability issue in relation to anything, it is because demand for a particular product, and housing is no different, exceeds supply. So there's a whole range of measures in here which will boost supply. And while you will find that it's very difficult to specifically quantify the specific effect in the future of specific measures to boost supply, what you do know is that if you boost supply and you have an affordability issue, then all other things being equal, prices will be lower than they otherwise would have been. That is self-evidently the effect of boosting supply in a market where supply is not meeting demand. Now, and to the extent that you are pursuing very carefully calibrated and very carefully designed measures to assist on the demand side people who are currently locked out of the housing market, then it is important that you do it in such a way that you don't have negative that you minimize any unintended consequences, and that's what we've done in the way we've designed this package. But directionally and the overarching effect of this package is one of boosting supply, which will boost affordability.
But Minister, it's hard to give any credit to your comment that it's carefully calibrated when you have no estimation of numbers. Well, let's try and get some more detail.
But in the end, we can write up a model and we can put in assumptions, but in the end, this is going to play out in the real world, and we'll be able to have a conversation, down the track about how it has worked. And if it hasn't worked as well as we would like, we'll consider making further adjustments. But directionally, I say it again, if you've got an affordability issue in relation to something that is an important social issue, then increasing the supply will improve affordability. There's no question. We'll be able to monitor moving forward to what extent it has or it hasn't, and whether further policy action is required.
How will eligibility to be involved in the downsizer scheme be determined? Will it matter what size or price the new dwelling is that the householder moves into? Or could you actually buy a bigger or more expensive dwelling and still be eligible? A few details on how it works.
So, Senator, we are going to be developing some of those implementation details with a view to presenting the legislation from memory in spring of 2017. Is that right,
Correct.
Ms Wilkinson? So some of those things have yet to be worked through. As a general disposition, I think the view is not to be overly prescriptive about square meterage and dollar value, but I think that's something that on which we will consult and come to a view. Or the government will come to a view.
But the thing is, obviously, for you to be able to take advantage of this specific measure, the price of the new home that you move into would have to be less, because otherwise you're not going to release any capital, which you then would be able to direct in these circumstances into your superannuation account to take advantage of the provisions in this measure. I mean, you can hardly, if you're going to sell your home in order to buy a more expensive home, you would then not have available to you capital to direct into your superannuation retirement income account to take advantage of this measure, self-evidently.
Do you have to occupy the new dwelling? Minister, do you have to occupy the new dwelling to be eligible, or could you buy an investment property with the proceeds of the sale?
Say that again.
Do you have to occupy the new dwelling to be eligible?
Yeah.
Like, could you buy an investment property with the proceeds of the sale?
Well,
like, do you have to live in the place? Have you got any rules about this?
Well, the thing is, it really depends on where you're at in your. If you want to be able to put money into your superannuation fund, you've got to be able to release some capital from the transaction, would be number one. Number two, I would assume that some Australians who might consider taking advantage of this, might be approaching a phase in their life where they might consider going to a nursing home. These are all obviously circumstances that quite appropriately could fall under the overall ambit of this measure. But as Mr. Brennan and Ms. Wilkinson have already indicated, some of that implementation detail is yet to be finalised in time for introduction of the relevant legislation later this year.